Hello and welcome to the debate. I'm your host Sana Maqbool with you at BTV World. In today's show, we're going to be taking a look at a very important issue that, of course, Pakistan has been facing for quite some time now. And this is, of course, with regards to the war on terrorism and, of course, our strategy towards counterterrorism efforts and what needs to be done in this regard. We've had, of course, the National Action Plan previously as well. We have the Azm-e-Istikam now, and we've had, of course, many operations under different banners which have been conducted against terrorist forces within the country and, of course, those coming in from outside of the country as well. But what's of course important is how we're going to proceed forward in the fundamental ways that this issue is now facing us once again, and in the ways we can engage with different partners from around the world in support for the fight against terrorism. We've seen that the Chief of Army Staff has also visited the Pak-Afghan border and met with the soldiers there at the Pakistan post, has talked about the resolve and the preparedness of the armed forces that of course continues to remain the same, grows ever bigger every passing day. But of course, at the end of the day, what needs to be done, particularly in terms of fighting this threat and then moving forward with the collaboration and coordination of all the different stakeholders, is very, very important. Also, of course, in terms of the political ways that we can do that, but also in terms of the military and security ways that we can achieve it. This is important, particularly in terms of the first responders in the case as well, and in the ways that the army and security forces can be better prepared and better equipped to deal with the emerging threats. We have seen, of course, that there has also been an attack on the anti-terrorism force in Balochistan in Job district, and this, of course, resulted in the martyrdom of 3 force soldiers. And this is important, particularly in terms of the number of lives that unfortunately have been lost and have been sacrificed within this fight that Pakistan, of course, has given forward. But what exactly is the need of the hour, and how do we move forward with discussions such as those that was recently held with the representatives of China that came in and met with the Interior Ministry as well and talked about possible collaboration with counterterrorism and border management issues, and of course others including the US that also talks about its partnership with Pakistan, and particularly of course in terms of the ways in which terrorism affects internationally. But what does that mean on ground? What are the tangible action points that we can take? That is going to be an important discussion moving forward and will be part of today's show. We'll take a short break now and we'll continue the discussion as we come back. Welcome back to the debate. Today's show is going to be focusing on Pakistan's war against terrorism and what we can do on that front, given the kind of spike in terrorist activities that Pakistan has seen, particularly after the US troop withdrawal in Afghanistan, and then of course with reference to a number of decisions taken by previous political regimes that have resulted in the resurgence of a lot of terrorist activities within the country. So we're going to be taking a look at what this means for Pakistan's fight and what potential do the partners across the border also hold in providing that strength to Pakistan, and what all can be done both within and outside the country's borders. And thank you very much, Faisal, for joining us in the studios today. And I'll take your perspective first in terms of what it is that has been going on in the country in the recent past. How do we proceed forward, especially in terms of border management and border infiltration that has been there? Because we have, of course, put forward our calls to the Afghan Taliban regime to provide the reassurance that there isn't going to be such activity. However, safe havens continue to be provided. And so what sort of position does that put Pakistan in? Because in that sense, there is a fight that's going on, of course, within the borders as well, but there's this continuous threat that is emerging from outside of it. So what do we do with this when we don't see any response coming in from the other side?
Yes, and obviously when we talk about Pakistan, Pakistan wanted this, managed to be resolved with the help of course, Kabul government of the Taliban, but somehow they have their own preferences, and them preferences are not matching up with Pakistan. So in that case, of course, Pakistan has to safeguard itself, and we know that Pakistan fenced the border, but is the very border which has been, they have been using it, the terrorists, they have been using this border to cross the border, and there are certain places where even the fence, they have disturbed the fence as well, again and again, of course, Pakistan's military, it actually makes sure that the fence which is disturbed, it can be mended once more, and Pakistan has been doing it. And Pakistan, when it comes to, of course, countering the counter-terrorism sort of activities, the increase in that, it is a sort of evidence that the current setup, the current military setup, they are, of course, fastening the sort of problem which is being seen out there. The resolve is being looked after. But when it comes to, of course, on ground, the situation is the IBOs which were already been going on previously, very recently they have increased. As we know that more than 400 IBOs they were conducted since we have been seeing that the Azme Istakam, we have been of course seeing that it was at full-fledged. In this context of course IBOs, they were increased, the intelligence based operations, and then intelligence itself, it has been increased. But when it comes to across the border, there are provinces that are rogue, and of course Kabul government, they need to look after that, but somehow they are ignoring it.
Right.
Time is not far when of course the resolve from Pakistan would outreach to the very provinces within the territory of Afghanistan. That's when probably they will wake up that this was their responsibility, they were not in compliance with that.
Right.
And that is why somebody knocked on the door and woken them up.
Right. We've also been joined in the debate by Brigadier Retired Mr. Raashid, Wali, Janjua, who's Director Research IPRI. Thank you very much, Janjua Sahab, for joining us in the debate. And I'd also like your perspective on this, because we've discussed this a number of times now of what Pakistan needs to do and how, of course, we are still learning in terms of the way that we need to respond and the way that we need to properly strategize our ways and our counterterrorism activities, particularly when it comes to international partners as well. And so I want your take both in terms of what do you see in terms of the ways that we have moved forward from the National Action Plan and now moving forward with Azme Istikam, and also then how do we balance it out with the ways that we want to partner with other countries such as China, for example. In a recent discussion we've heard that there is this collaborative aspect that is being looked at in terms of border management and counterterrorism activities, but what does that mean on ground? I understand there are trainings of GB forces as well as part of that, but what will that amount to, particularly when we are dealing with these threats from across the border? Unable to hear you. Can you please unmute yourself? I'll come back to you, Janjua Sahab. We've also been joined, of course, in the studios by Senior Analyst Farrukh Pitafi. And Farrukh, I also want your perspective, particularly in terms of the ways that we can deal with this at home. You've spoken about how this is Pakistan's fight, and this is what your primary concern is, as it should be for all of us, that Pakistani citizens are protected. But what does that mean when we always have this imminent threat coming in from outside of the border as well? Can we do this on our own within the borders, irrespective of what goes on outside?
Right, Sana, thank you very much for acknowledging that I have been actually going on or going off like a broken record for quite some time, repeating the same thing over and over, and it doesn't seem to have an impact. So I don't know what to expect now, but usually when it comes to Afghanistan and when it comes to governments which are not that capable of actually policy changes, usually what I subscribe to is called Hanlon's razor. That means never attribute to malice.
Yeah.
That can be explained by stupidity or incompetence. But in this case, it seems that there is malice involved as well.
Okay.
Because of course, when Taliban's previous government was dislodged, Pakistan played a very crucial role. And this is something that is somehow obscured by our rhetoric, because we keep on talking about how brotherly Afghanistan is and how our hearts are together. We ignore the fact that this is the administration that has been very critical of Pakistan publicly and privately. So if they allow such sanctuaries to exist in this country, that might be out of design also, by design rather than just circumstantial, right? Because of all that, one has to actually say that the best solution is to fence the border and guard it with drones or whatever technology you have got, or satellite or whatever you have got, and then get to the task of fighting terrorism within your own borders. And that is one thing that we have been doing for quite some time. The only blip, and that was a fatal blip, was PTR's government, which actually ended up compromising so much and importing terrorism again. Because of that, circumstances have changed. But the resolve of the law enforcement agencies has always been there. The biggest problem is the rest of the village doesn't seem to be working in tandem. One, since this war began, since then, we have been seeing more or less similar kind of drama going on in judiciary. Sometimes somebody is going, somebody is coming, sometimes it is lawyers' movement, sometimes it is something else. But judiciary hasn't been able to play a role in fighting terrorism. Similarly, Parliament. Our Parliament has been totally balkanized, so to speak, polarized. And because of that, we haven't seen the kind of legislation that was needed. And then the political parties. I mean, one of them actually handed over our victories to TTP in its dying years. So with that kind of situation, what do you expect? I will keep on going off like a broken record, but I have stopped expecting too much.
Right, and that is, of course, unfortunate. And I want to take Janjua Saab, your perspective on this as well, because the criminal justice system and the way that we want to move forward with the way that we're going to try and see how we're going to engage with these groups, and also, of course, the political and religious elite is very, very important. And accountability at home, because it's not just, of course, what is happening with the terrorist groups that has caused this situation or that has brought us where we are today, but it's also decisions of the past that have resulted in the kind of a situation that we are in at the moment. And so where is the accountability, and how do we move forward, taking the courts along, taking, of course, accountability for all along, because it seems that many seem to think that they are above the law and they have been able to get away with it. Why is it that there hasn't been much done about that? And I hope I can hear you this time.
Yes, I think accountability, capacity building, and actual, political oversight of the whole environment. That is the real problem with us, because we have a provincial government which is supposed to, spend a lot of time on security issues, but I believe their attention is not riveted so much on these security issues because of the politics. Unfortunately, if the political ownership is not there, then outsourcing everything to law enforcement agencies like Army, Frontier Corps, and police, that redounds to the advantage of those who are fighting you. Then the capacity building part. You see, we have seen this attack on diplomats' convoy in Swat. Now that's a very dastardly thing, and we know who is doing that, because there is a whole money trail which sustains such insurgencies and acts of terrorism. And who wanted Pakistan to be embarrassed? Had some diplomat been injured, it would have been a very, very big embarrassment for Pakistan. But that means Al-Qaeda and ISIK and TTP, they might not have any compunction, but then their handlers and their financiers in the raw, they also do not have any compunction in spilling the blood of even diplomats in their sinister acts of subversion and terror against Pakistan. We need accountability. I could not agree more with you. Accountability is absolute must. and accountability must start at the apex level, at the political level. Political ownership should be taken. Why it is not being taken? People and people's representatives have to be held to account. Then the armed forces. Of course, there is a need to revisit our strategy as to why these acts of terror have started happening in a settled district like Swat. And we need to do some soul searching ourselves. The leadership has to be more assertive, both at operational level and the law enforcement agencies like police. They have to be taken along. If there are some capacity deficits, then till the time that capacity deficit is not fully made up, some hand holding has to be done by army, and they have to work in unison. Then the intelligence agencies, they have to ramp up their whole surveillance and intelligence gathering effort so as to ensure that they work hand in glove with these civilian agencies and the civilian district administration. In fact, one of the serious problems in these areas is both in merged districts and the settled areas which are in contiguity of these merged districts. Now, there's a problem of a complete governance vacuum. There's no district administration. And in the absence of that, there is a problem. There used to be a system on ground where the locals and the political agents in the past, they formed a very strong bondage. And that was the governance of the erstwhile FATA, which though people did not like because of FCR and other things, but still it was effective. Now that thing has finished, and the second, order, one order has gone and the second order has not emerged. So amongst this disorder, there's a lot of gray space for non-state actors to operate, and the state's writ is not present. That is the unfortunate reality. And if the armed forces have taken on this gauntlet, they must run this gauntlet and must ensure that they post their very best. The leadership has to be very assertive. There should be accountability of these acts. And I think we need to start owning the road, owning the nights, and making sure that we have the confidence of the locals. The locals have to be on your side, and they have to act as your eyes and ears, because you yourself mentioned that once the TTP was allowed in the garb of parleys to come back, that created a kind of a bad blood between the local population and the law enforcement agencies, because local population thought that we who fought on behalf of the state and with the state against these elements and these goons are being allowed to come back. So that created a kind of a climate of fear and distrust. So all those things have to be alleviated and ameliorated. And along with that, better border controls, the fighting the illegal crime spectrum, modification of criminal justice system, so as to ensure that the conviction rate of these terrorists, it increases. At the moment, it is abysmally low, which acts as a demoralizing factor for law enforcement agencies and armed forces.
Right. Janjua Sahab, I also want your perspective in terms of the sphere of influence that you were mentioning earlier. And I understand that that has historically existed between different groups of people, especially in erstwhile FATA, in KP and Balochistan. And there is, of course, the element of spoilers that are also using this to their own advantage. But why is that this sphere of influence that has existed by the spoilers hasn't been something that we as the government or the security setup or the people have been able to achieve with these different regions in order to integrate ourselves within those areas as well with the people of those areas and create less and less space for spoilers to fill and to utilize for their own benefit and to harm Pakistan?
That is because the proper financial integration of FATA with the settled districts has not happened. We now call them merged districts, and law of the land is applicable. But how many courts are operating there? no courts are operating in those areas, and they are all in major districts close to the settled areas because of the security reasons. And situation has become so critical that now even the settled areas are facing the heat, like DI Khan, Tanak, Lucky Marwat. Now, you have to restrict the space for maneuver for these elements. How you would do that? By increasing the signature of the state. And what is that signature of the state? There has to be district administration. There has to be police. There used to be a institution of levies. That has gone, and now the police is being recruited. But whether we have done the right recruitment, whether we have trained that police, which comprises people from the merged districts, whether that police is capable of taking on the brunt of these hardcore terrorists, these are all moot questions. And at the end of the day, it's a question of resources. We have to see how much we are resourcing, how much we are, spending on our law enforcement agencies. Army alone cannot win this war. Our police has to be, and its counterterrorism department has to come up trump.
But Janjua Sab, is it really only a matter of resources? Is there not much that we can also do within these resources? I mean, it does not take a lot of resources to engage with people, does it?
And by the way, because you have mentioned this financial responsibility that has somehow been evaded, if you remember, there was a commitment that provinces from provincial share of the NFC are going to provide 2% for the integration of FATA. What do you think is stopping them, and why is it that we are in such a mess?
Once the merger was done, the share of KP increased by 5%. From 14.5, I guess it became 19%, which has not been given so far out of the divisible pool of NFC. The federal government promised that 2016 onwards, I believe every year 100 billion was promised, and by now it would have been close to $1 billion. But how much has been actually disbursed? How much has been allocated? How much has been spent? Now those are the figures that will give you the reality. We have to do a better job of providing these resources. And engagement part that Sana was referring to, yes, that is very important. Engagement means that you got to, whether you belong to a law enforcement agency, whether you belong to a district administration, or you are part of the judicial apparatus, you must go amongst the tribes, feel their pulse, live with them, be assertive, win them over, face the threats, and then win back the confidence. Because unless the courts start operating and start dispensing justice without fear of terrorists, if the police does not operate its police stations efficiently, it's not seen present on the ground effectively, and if the Frontier Corps and other army elements, they do not engage. I mean, this engagement was earlier on with the local elders, which were called Maliks, but that system was dismantled. And now if you want to create a semblance of that system within the new merged district environment, I think it would not be a very impractical idea to win those people, those who are influential people, give them some incentives, because they will be won over to your cause if you provide them some resources, make them feel important, give them some incentives.
How? Because there is a concern. Those tribal elders that you're talking about used to operate their jirgas there. That was a legal system of its own. And now you have constitution applicable there. So any parallel system of governance or judiciary will not be useful or productive. So how do you actually, harmonize the two ideas?
No, I was not referring to jirgas and legal system is there and law of the land is there. I was referring to an arrangement whereby these local elders, now we call them elders, earlier on it was Malaks, they should be engaged you should give them some financial incentive, some kind of powers, informally, so that they feel important amongst their, because whether we accept it or not, it's still very tribal society out there. So people who are having clout amongst their clan, their tribe, they are the people who have to be won over, and they should be given some kind of financial incentive, some importance, some tangible rewards, and some tangible, financial incentives, so that they go back to the tribe, and tell them that, look, this is how we, and this system used to work earlier on, albeit differently, but this can be done. So this is one of the innovative approaches that I am just referring to, because if you want to fight an atomized threat like TTP, which recruits amongst the locals, which are suffering poverty, livelihood loss, and lack of development, you got to win over the tribe, because tribes should start looking towards the state. And who controls the tribes? It is the local elders. So our law enforcement agencies, our FC, our police, our district administration, army, they must get hold of such people who can stand with the state and act as a bulwark against this, floodgate of terrorist activity that is spiraling out of control.
Brigadier Janjua, geostrategically speaking, when we obviously talk about India, we know that India is behind financing all of this terrorism in Pakistan, of course against Pakistan and CPEC, eventually of course against China as well. But we know West is still seeing India as an economic giant, and they have the economic endeavors. Should we be waiting for NATO states to get sober from this cocktail of course, going against China and their economic endeavors, or we should simply tell them that there is another CSTO that is, of course, being posed to us? They are, of course, extending their help to Pakistan to counter this menace. Eventually, ISKP is not a threat to Pakistan. Pakistan is just the opening gate to them, but it's an ultimate threat for the whole world. Shouldn't we be talking with the rest of the world? If NATO and the Western powers are not ready to stand with Pakistan, then why not CSTO?
You see, CSTO is a different organization. I don't think Pakistan can form part of that framework. Even SCO, we have a problem because of India. You see, India is the 1,000 pounds gorilla, which is a kind of a spoil sport. And why? Because of its newfound relevance in the global competition. And we talk a lot about illegal spectrum, crime, upon which organizations and entities like TTP depend. But imagine, by this criminal activity, ransom, smuggling, they could have earned a few millions. But Indians have a lot of potential. Raw can open the conduit. $10-20 million is nothing for a country like India nowadays. For TTP is a lot. So that is why TTP is not short of ammunition. It is not short of manpower. It's not short of any logistics, because Raw is actively supporting, and this is a reality. And even in SCO, there is a organized mechanism which is called RATS, which deals with countering terrorism. But that is not effective, because India does not see eye to eye with either China or Pakistan. In SCO, unfortunately, India is also a part. So we should not have very high hopes from the West or any other organization. But yes, a regional approach, including China, Russia, countries like Iran, they can exert pressure on Afghan interim government. And for us, I think we have no choice but to remain engaged with Afghan interim government despite their obduracy and lack of cooperation. And sometimes we need to exert pressure on them. They should understand that we can go a step further, and like we did cross-border attacks on those bases in hot pursuit. So that kind of leverage and pressure we should maintain, but at the same time, we cannot completely jettison them, because unfortunately, if we do that, they might pell-mell get into the lap of India.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you very much,
Thank you
Brigadier
very much.
Janjua, for joining us and being a part of the discussion. Thank you, Farrukh and Faisal, for being part of the debate as always. That's all from the discussion, but of course our war on terrorism continues, and this is a fight that Pakistan has to put forward to safeguard its own citizens and its own borders, and that is of course our ultimate priority, whether or not we have international partners in this. That's all that we have from the show today. We'll now see you tomorrow.